go ahead and open up to Ephesians chapter 4. I have 4:58. The clock says 5, a little past 5. So we'll go ahead and get started. Let me explain to you what we're doing tonight and why I have the stool out. I have not had a regression in my recovery. I like the stool, and I like being down here closer to you. And so I decided to do that tonight. So in this period, we typically do it as a class. This material tonight, I've decided to just kind of give it as a sermon. And I'm just going to teach, and I'll talk for probably 30, 35 minutes about this. And then I'm going to just say at the end, what do you guys think about this and things that you want to point out or bring out. But I thought because some of the things that I have to say, I think they kind of follow on each other, and I think we'll talk over ourselves. I just decided to go ahead and do it this way. So I'll just be talking for a little while here, and then if you have anything that you strongly disagree with, just don't say anything. But if you have anything you want to say, let's save that for the last part. I'll give you some time when we're toward the end. Ephesians 4, verse 29. Ephesians 4, verse 29 says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." There is a unique power that we have in words. Have you ever left a conversation where you felt bad about the way the conversation went? And you go home and you replay in your head what happened in the conversation and what you said and what they said, and you have those feelings like, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I'd thought of a better way to say that. Or I really regret that word choice. Have you ever had somebody say, you know, I remember when you said this, and you realize you don't even remember saying it, or maybe you're a little bit embarrassed by the fact that you said that, okay, if you have especially somebody who hasn't known you or seen you for a long time. Or about on the flip side, have you ever had somebody tell you how much something you said encouraged them? So they say, I remember when you said this. Maybe you don't even remember saying it. One of the things that happened to me when I was a very young man, I was sitting in a church building when the preacher got up to preach, and there was a little group of us young people. We would sit on the first and second row over here on this side of the building, and he turned to us and he said, you know, some of you boys need to think about preaching. And I think I was 11. And it was just like a lightning bolt hit me. Wow, that's a great idea. I will. And really that was the origin of the idea of me thinking about preaching as what I wanted to do with my life. And I don't think that brother even knows the word that he said that encouraged me to the degree it has, and it's really formed an important part of my life. There is a power we have in words. There's a power to build up and to tear down. There's a power to corrupt. There's a power to heal. We can extend good things with our words, and we can extend awful things with our words. The proverb writer says there's death and life are in the power of the tongue, Proverbs 18:21. So the reason I'm talking about this tonight is because there have been several events that have conspired over the last couple of weeks to really illustrate to me how I need to work on using my speech. And I'm not ruling out providence in some of these things, but I thought giving you a little background might help to make you think too about things in your life that are similar. I had a couple of occasions over the last couple of weeks that were really powerful opportunities for me to gossip about people. And that is not a good thing for me. That is a weakness that I have. That I try to work on, and sometimes, especially when I'm caught unawares, I find myself really tempted to do that. I had a couple of those situations over the last few weeks. I've had 2 different occasions where I felt like I had to go back and apologize for something I said that I really regretted and really weighed on me, and I regretted the influence that I lost in those situations. And then there were all these events that happened last week in Charlottesville, most of which center around speech concerns, okay? What somebody is saying, and then what somebody else says in response, and then what do I say about what everybody's saying, and then what does the president say about what everybody's saying about what everybody's saying, and everybody's, well, what do I say about what the president said about what they said about what they said, and on and on and on. It's all about speech. And the focus there so much that really we see the power speech has, because all of the tension, when we describe tension, what we're really saying is people aren't saying things like we think they should say them. And then I worked this week on this lesson that I preached this morning about grace. And this passage came up in my study, and it reminded me of some of the importance and the things that tie in with grace. And so what I want to talk about is here in Ephesians 4:29, how it talks about how we should use our speech to give grace. And that's really what I want to think about, speaking to give grace. That there are ways we can give gifts. That's the idea of grace. Doing something that is unearned and unnecessarily good or kind. I don't have to do it. It's something I choose to do. And I can do that with the way that I speak. And I want us to think about that for a few minutes. We're going to center the study tonight on two passages. This verse, Ephesians 4:29, and a very closely related verse. It's a parallel verse, Colossians 4:5 and 6. So we'll go back and forth between the two, and you'll know when we want to do that. But right now, let's stick in Ephesians 4:29. First thing I want to say about speaking to give grace is that gracious speech benefits the hearer. It is something that is focused on the other. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth." That word corrupting, or your version might say corrupt, comes from a word that means to decay or cause to decay. So it can have either sense. That is, it can be something that's corrupt in itself, or it can be something that causes something else to corrupt. It is corrupting. And I think that is the sense of the word in this passage. I agree with the rendering that the ESV has, talk that will corrupt others. Okay, so it's not just that my talk is corrupt in itself, but that it serves to hurt other people. When I talk in a certain way, it corrupts them, it defiles them because it affects them, it changes them. So I want you to see that there is a correlation in the pattern of Paul's wording. Look back in verse 28. In verse 28, "Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need." So you've got that pattern. Don't do this, don't steal, but instead labor, working with your hands so you can bless others. You can share with those who are in need. Now, 29, "Let no corrupt word come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." Something that needs to be eliminated because it's harmful to others, stealing or corrupting talk, and in its place needs to be put something that's positive, that blesses others. I work hard so I can have something to give to you, to share with people in need. And so I speak in a way that's going to build you up and impart grace to the hearers. So the focus is how my speech impacts you. It either corrupts you or it builds you up. But always in speech, in this verse and in the next one we're going to look at, the focus is on what's going on in the hearer. There is building up, that's a part of that, and there's giving grace, that's a part of that. But all of this is so that people will be better for having heard me talk. When you hear me speak, you leave that conversation improved in some way and benefits the hearer. Let's go over to Colossians 4. I'd put my finger or my marker here in Ephesians 4. We'll go back and forth. But let's go over to Colossians 4. Colossians 4 and verse 5 says, "Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each one." So, you see how the verse is parallel to Ephesians 4. That is, it's about the idea of our speech giving grace, specifically in verse 6, that it always be gracious or with grace, seasoned with salt, may know how you ought to answer each one. This verse, though, is different from Ephesians 4 in that it's focused on those outside. That's verse 5, toward outsiders, people who are not a part of Christ's body. So, because I am interacting with people all the time who are not a part of Christ's body, I'm careful how I speak to them because I'm concerned about how is my speech affecting them. And so I'm going to be careful with that. Verse 6, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so you may know how you ought to answer each person." Tempered with things that are going to make it go down easier, like salt makes it taste better. Okay, it's something that I'm going to be careful about the way I word what I'm saying because I'm always looking to how is this going to impact that person? Is it going to benefit them or not? That's the question. So, all of this instruction is focused on the hearer and not the speaker. That's the point. And I think we really need to consider this. This is a paradigm shift. Because when we speak, usually, we are speaking because of something within us. We're concerned about how do I feel, and can I express how I feel? What do I like? What do I want to say? What do you need to know? But it's not really about you, is it? You need to know it because I think you need to know it. Okay? The focus when we speak is usually on us. This is a paradigm shift where we begin to say, are my words really intended to do anything? Or are they just about me getting something off my chest? Am I just using you in conversation so that you're there to hear everything I want to say? Haven't you had those conversations before where when someone else is talking, you're not really listening because what you want to do is talk next? And so, you'll sit there and you'll be polite and you'll nod so that they'll finally be quiet so you can talk. Okay, now here we go. Now the conversation is going to really thrive because I'm speaking. Okay, that is what I'm talking about when I talk about a speech that's not about the hearer. It's not about them at all. They're just there. Okay, but really it's about me getting something off my chest. And this, I think, is particularly important in the time in which we live, where so many people want to be heard all the time, and we really want to be interesting to people, and so we're focused on how is what I'm saying going to be taken, but not because I want to help them, but because I want to get something from them. I want their approval, I want their support, and so that becomes the issue in modern times. I really believe in our time we've become a lot like the Athenians, who are always sitting around looking to hear or to tell something new. Okay, and that's what we want. We want to hear something new. And so we want to be the one to speak something new because that's how we get some credibility in our society and in our time. And so always the focus is on us instead of them. But gracious speech benefits other people. So somebody gossips. Is me joining in that going to help them or hurt them? When I get really frustrated and I really want to tell you about it, is expressing the full force of my anger, is that really about you or about me? Is that going to help you or is it going to hurt you? When I talk to people who are outside of Christ, am I just trying to win the argument? So that when they're done, they'll say, well, I don't really like Jacob, but he sure is right. Or am I trying to really help them to understand and to accept something? Is it about me or is it about them? Am I trying to justify myself and my position so that I argue no matter what? And if so, it's not really about them, that's about me. Gracious speech, giving grace in our speech, is going to be about the hearer. Second thing I want us to see is that gracious speech fits the occasion. Look at Colossians 4:5. Colossians 4:5. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. The best use of the time. There's an awareness of opportunities. This foolish speech squanders opportunities. When we talk without thinking, when we're not careful, then we end up not fitting the occasion, and people are no longer willing to hear us. Verse 6, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. That last part, you may know how you ought to answer each person, implies some variability. That not every situation requires the same tools or the same approach. That each person's going to be different. Each situation is going to be different. And I have to have the awareness in what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, that I'm appropriate to the situation. I fit the occasion. Let's go back to Ephesians 4. In Ephesians 4, you also have this idea of what's appropriate or what's fitting. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. Different translations have different renderings. I know the New American Standard says, according to the need of the moment. The New Revised Standard says, as there is need. Something about the need necessary for edification. That need is the idea, but it's a focus on them and a focus on what do you need right now. I'm going to speak to your need. So there's an awareness of the situation. That's what we're talking about. What fits in this time, in this conversation, in this moment with this person? What's fitting? Because some approaches are not fitting for those times. So I cannot just have my talk be all sound bites and zingers. Okay, that's not the way every conversation can go. In fact, I'm not sure any conversation really thrives on sound bites and zingers. But I'm going to deal with a person, for example, who has a sincere interest and sincere questions differently than I'm going to deal with somebody who is just hostile. Okay, those are different approaches required as fits the occasion. And we need to be aware of that. What's going on in the conversation? How is my approach fitting to the situation that I'm presented with? So if I'm really focused on the other person, that's our first point, then I'm going to understand it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of conversation. That's also true, by the way, when we talk with one another. Not everybody who's my brother or sister needs the same approach or is handled the same way. And we have to be careful with one another in that. There are some occasions that call for a really serious and somber tone. And then there are some that don't, where that would be totally out of place. And there are some people that require patience and care. And then there are times where there needs to be a stronger word spoken. But all of this is about what fits the occasion, what's best for them. And I think this too, if this is my thought, I'm venturing into opinion territory, so you can certainly take me to task if you disagree. But it seems to me that if I can't express joy in times of joy, then my anger is going to mean very little. Because I'm always angry. Even when I should be happy, I'm angry. So when somebody says, oh, Jacob's angry, well, he's always angry. Who cares? But if I'm also unable to express anger or frustration or concern, then my joy's not going to mean much, because people are just going to say, oh, he's always happy, never has a cross word. So why does it matter that you're happy now? So what we do is we gain credibility, in my view, from being able to fit the occasion and from being able to say, no, there are times where serious things need to be dealt with seriously, and there are times where concern needs to be taken about how I approach others. So I show kindness by talking appropriately. Appropriateness is what this means. And not every situation demands the same approach. Not everything is appropriate for every situation. Third thing, don't worry. If you got something you want to say, I'll give you time at the end. And if you don't agree, then you don't get to talk at all. I'm just teasing, by the way. Okay. Gracious speech is thoughtful. Gracious speech is thoughtful. Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. There is a deliberateness to this, okay? As I focus on what the need of the person is and what fits the occasion, I think before I speak. Is this going to build up? Is this going to be good? Does this need to be said? Is that the best word? Should I be stronger? Should I be calmer? What's going on? How can I best give grace in this conversation? Turn over to Colossians 4. I told you we go back and forth. Colossians 4, verse 5. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. So here you have, verse 5, wisdom. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. There's thought here. And then there is also so that you may know how you ought to answer each one. That is, our approach to people cannot just be reactionary. That's what I'm getting at. When I talk about being thoughtful, I'm saying the thing that we've heard most of our lives, we need to think before we speak. That the best kind of speaking, the kind of speaking that's going to achieve the aims we want it to achieve, is going to be speaking that comes from careful thought, not reactionary speaking. Very, very rarely do we accomplish anything good by just saying the first thing that comes to our heads. That's just not the way speech works. We understand that there is a need for some filtering. I want you to look at this with me in James 1. James talks about this, and I think this wisdom is really important as we think about how we can do good with our speech. James 1 and verse 19. James 1:19, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Now notice he makes a connection between anger and speaking. Because when we're angry, we usually speak, and usually when we're angry, we speak before we should. We have too short a distance from the mind to the mouth. It just moves too fast. And so he tells us, slow down. Verse 19, Be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Okay? All of that is about limiting the danger that anger can do, because the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So there's thought that needs to be taken here before I just react. Now, haven't we had that happen to all of us? Where in a moment of anger we said something and we wish we could just pull those words right back in. Haven't we had that? Not necessarily just because we did the foot in the mouth thing. We all do that. That's not really what I'm going for. I don't think that's what James is going for. James is saying you say things in anger you would not say if you were not angry. So stop and wait. Slow to speak. Before you speak, take thought. I think I need to say something here about self-awareness. When I talk about being thoughtful, I need to be aware when I am angry. And I need to know that something is making me angry. And I think this is part of the thoughtfulness that goes into really mastering how we use our speech. Because if I'm really angry, that may be a time where I don't need to say anything. And there are also some things that I've just found in myself when I make mistakes in my speech. Something is going on in me that when I look back in kind of the post-mortem of what happened, I realize that's what was going on with me. So, I need to be aware of my motivations. Sometimes I say things I shouldn't because I feel a certain way, because I feel threatened or I feel jealous, because I'm trying to impress somebody. And I end up saying things or becoming frustrated in ways that I wouldn't normally. But see, I'm not thinking in that moment. It's only after I make the big mistake that I go back and think. Gracious speech says, here's what I'm feeling. Now, how am I going to speak? How am I going to respond? I'm aware that I'm angry. Am I going to speak out of this anger? I know what that does. I know what it feels like when people speak out of anger to me. I know the damage. I know what that feels like to try to put the words back in my mouth. I know what it feels like when I've got to apologize for something I've said. I don't want to do that. How can I stop that process? So James says, be swift to hear and slow to speak. Think instead of just responding reflexively. And be aware of how you're feeling in that moment so that you don't end up just speaking out of your emotion and end up not giving grace but doing damage. All right, fourth thing. Gracious speech builds. Let's go back to Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4 and verse 29. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths. You guys are going to know this verse by the end of this lesson, aren't you? We've read it so many times. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. It's good for building up is the words I want to focus on. That is a word, yours might say something like necessary edification. Okay, something that is about building. And that word, building up or edifying, comes from the word to build a building. Constructing, like we talk about constructive words. Okay? Or we talk about building an edifice. So we're edifying one another. We're building something. So the question is, what is my speech building? How am I using my words toward good ends and trying to accomplish something with what I'm saying? That's a different perspective, isn't it? Okay? Not did I just get through the day and get to say what was on my mind, but did I do something with the power God's given me to be able to speak? Now, when you read about edification in the New Testament, one of the things that's interesting about edification is that edification comes by means of truth. So, in fact, in Ephesians 4 here, he talks about speaking the truth in love. The church can grow up into Christ and can edify itself in love. Speaking the truth in love. Or when Paul says in Acts 20 to the Ephesian elders, I commend you to God, the word of His grace that's able to build you up. The word builds up. The word from God edifies us. It makes us into something that we were not before. And then you remember in 1 Corinthians where Paul is so concerned about how they were speaking in tongues but nobody understood. Because he said, let it be for the edification of the church that you seek to excel. We have to be able to understand in order to be built up. So all of this is to say, words are essential in building Christians. But what we're talking about here is gracious speech builds by communicating truth in a constructive way. that I am building instead of tearing down? That's what the challenge of speech really is. Because we all have goals for things that we want to see built. Let me give you some examples. I want my children to be great people. I want my children to be productive citizens. I want them to be men and women of faith. I want them to be loving people. I want them to be responsible people. Okay, so that is a vision I have for them. How am I building that with the way I talk to them and the things I say to them? When I get done with the day, was it just about clean your room, put that down, put that down, put that down? We say that a lot. Or is it about speaking in ways that they are going to be closer to what they should be, to what I want them to be, to what God wants them to be, because their Father has spoken to them in a certain way? How am I constructing them? How am I contributing to their good? I want my life to be happy and fulfilling. I want to have a wife who is faithful and loving and supportive to me. Am I building that with the way I talk to her? Something constructive, or am I tearing her down? I want this church to be awesome. Am I building that? How is my speaking about us or to us helping us to achieve that, or cutting down my brothers and sisters and tearing down what we're trying to build? I have a goal of having great friends who love me and know me and hold me accountable. But how am I speaking that into existence? Am I building that, or am I tearing that down? I think this is where our national discourse needs some work. You know, how we talk about America. Because usually, when we talk about what's going on in our world, it is to tear down the things that we don't like. It is to cut down and insult and criticize. But as a disciple of Jesus, the question has to be, how am I giving grace? What am I building? What am I edifying with what I'm saying? Speaking to build people and making things better and giving hope, giving grace, strengthening. And so I see in this a positivity to this word, that I'm not constantly harping on everything that I don't like. Okay, but I am instead looking towards something better and higher and greater, and then trying with all I can to make sure my conversation pushes people in that direction. If you were to get I would say tape, but we don't really have tapes anymore, a recording of all that you say in a given day, and you were to rate it based on, was this a positive thing you said or a negative thing you said? I wonder, what do you think your rating would be? How the different ways you interact with people, with your family, with your coworkers, with your friends, with people you know, with your brothers and sisters in Christ. How do you think that would rate? Do you believe that your speech shows that you're a positive person who builds, or are you a negative person that tears down? Paul is challenging us. Give grace with your speech so that people are better. Last thing I want to talk about is that gracious speech tends toward mercy. I apologize for that being in the little bow of the present. I really liked the little present, and I didn't want to have to pick a different slide picture. So I just decided to run the words right through. I hope you'll give me some mercy about that. That was a joke. So gracious speech tends toward mercy. Ephesians 4:29 says that it may give grace to those who hear. And Paul goes on to talk about several things that have to do with grace and forgiveness. He talks about in verse 31, getting rid of bitterness and wrath and anger. And he talks about verse 32 and in chapter 5 and verse 1 and 2 about love and about forgiveness. What he is saying is, and I don't think we can deny the connection here, that giving grace is also about being willing to look past some of the things that are imperfections in our brothers and sisters as we work together. Being able to give grace by forgiving or by tending toward mercy. One of the greatest gifts, you want to talk about grace as giving gifts, one of the greatest gifts I can ever give someone is to be able to say, after what you've done to me, we're still fine. And we've got no problem. Everything is back to normal. Don't worry about it. If the two hardest words to say are, I'm sorry, then the two sweetest words to hear, at least in our house, were always, it's okay. It's okay. We're done. It's over. We'll move on. And when we talk that way, when we tend toward mercy and we can't wait to get this big problem off the table so that we can move forward in our relationship, then we're giving grace with our speech. I want you to go with me to James chapter 2. James 2 and verse 13. Simple little verse that I think is really about broader categories than just what James is talking about in the context. James 2 and verse 13, he says, "For judgment is without mercy to the one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment." Mercy triumphs over judgment. I believe he is saying, just which of these do you prefer and which of these do you want to be? You want to be a person who is always about judging, or do you want to be a person who is always about mercy? Mercy is better than judgment. We know that. We talked about that this morning. We much prefer mercy as regards us, but sometimes we don't prefer to extend mercy. And so when we talk about speaking to give grace, this has to be a part of it. Now, when we talk about this, I tend to, and I did a little of that this morning, I tend to jump to the issue of sin and personal forgiveness and what all needs to happen in that. But I think we need to remember that the majority of the things that we get crossed with one another about are usually just personal differences and matters of perspective and things that we can look another way at and be fine. Something that was said that what did you mean by that? Okay? Something that was done and I don't know what he's going for here. I'm suspicious of him. Or things where we say, I don't understand why you didn't invite me. I don't understand why you're sitting in my pew. I don't understand, and so there is a lot of that when we speak, tending toward mercy, with the tone of mercy, with the desire for mercy, it changes those issues. Mercy triumphs over judgment. And as the people of Jesus, we need to be people who are characterized by mercy, where people say, if I talk to him, I know how he's going to respond. If I try to make this right, I know he'll be merciful to me. I know we'll get this taken care of. And I'll just say this on this point. One of the major word groups, as you study the word grace in the New Testament, is that grace is the word for thanksgiving. Over and over again, it's the word for giving thanks. And so when we are merciful people, when we're willing to give grace, we become a thankful people. We understand what's been forgiven, and we also understand how valuable it is that we maintain relationships with imperfect people like us. And so we're thankful to God for what he's done, and we're also thankful for the opportunity to reflect what he's done in our relationships with other people. Let me give you a couple of challenges, and then I'll open it up to you. I'm going to challenge you this week to think about your conversations and to act deliberately. Employ the filter this week. You know the filter. Sometimes we try to sidestep the filter. Doesn't usually work out. The filter that says no corrupt words. The filter that says I'm not just going to react. The filter that says, how is this helping someone else? How is this appropriate? Have I thought about what I'm about to say? What am I building? And am I being merciful? And I want you to leave every conversation this week and ask yourself the question, did I make that person better in how I talk to them? Now that will be a difficult challenge. But I challenge you because I believe that's what Paul is telling us. That we can transform our speech into a way God uses us to bless other people and to give grace. Am I building the world I want to see with the way that I talk to other people? Am I building other people in Christ? Am I too sharp? No offense, sharps. Am I too sharp? Do I need to extend mercy? Or am I too weak? And maybe I need to be sharper. Are there things that need to change so that I bless others with my speech? All right, well, that's all I've got. Thank you for your attention. Now, do you guys have anything you want to say? You've got 5 minutes.